Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and had a great World Oceans Day. For today's Kai and Korero, we are joined by Te Atarangi Sayers. Again, if you've got any questions during his presentation, please leave them in the comment box and we'll pick up on those after his presentation. So today we'll be mostly talking about TA's efforts to protect the waters surrounding Mauri Island. But that's just one of the many things that he's been involved with. But I'm sure that TA can explain better himself. So can you give us a little introduction to yourself? What do you do? What projects are you involved in?
Ipaneke, ka nukunuku, ka nekeneke, titiro ki te tai o te moana o nui o kiwa, kia taka tō te pai, kia taka tō te pai. Ko maunga roa te maunga, ko wairere te awa, ko tamatia ki te huatahi te marae, ko Ngāti Takahanga te hapu o Mōtiti. Kia ora no tātou, kia ora no tātou. He karakia ki te kai o te rā, e tō mātou te rangi kia whakapai ki nei kai, he oranga mō mātou tinana, me mātou aroha, me tēnei rā, mauri ora tātou. Kia ora everyone, and thank you Fleur for the kind invitation to share this kaupapa with you all today. I would I'd just first like to acknowledge what I've shared in that little mihi and my pepeha, and that was actually about the movements of the tides, that the tides come in and out, and as long as we keep within the cycle of life, that our moana and our sense of being will be good, and that our relationship with the world is intrinsically related to this life force that our ocean actually provides. So my name is Te Atarangi, and I've been a technical advisor for the MPA Rohemoana Trust on this long journey of developing and preserving the marine natural character of the MPA Rohemoana in particular as a technical advisor, but also in relation to the development of marine spatial planning and informed decision making, utilising the functions of the Resource Management Act. So this presentation kind of goes through the genesis, or the whakapapa, that sits behind how we evolved this way of looking at our marine space. This isn't new. This is actually just, I suppose, helping to inform the way in which these functions exist. And as we go through this process, we'll be looking at various interpretations of those natural and cultural layers that have made up the marine spatial planning process through the Coastal Environment Plan. So I'd just like to start with obviously this image here is the Te Tini tangaroa, or the multitudes of tangaroa, and this is at Te Tau o Tahiti after or just before the exclusion zone from the Rena salvage happened. And as you can see, there's a myriad of life with our taonga species, all associated with this reef system. This reef system's long been a high exposure reef system, and has and sits out off the coast of the Bay of Plenty here. It is a representation of a resilient mauri life force that sits in our moana, and we actually draw our energy from that living system, and we draw it there together as an ocean community. Both Maori, Pākehā, Tauiwi, we all experience that life force together, and we all experience it through various different ways, through our cultural practices and our cultural identities and associations, through our recreational well-being and our ability to have an association and relationship with the living ocean, through our commercial economic relationships that also exist in terms of providing for the continuity of connection over the last 2 decades, and also the wider public that really are intrinsically tied to the reality that every second breath we take is from the ocean. It's through the primary producers of the ocean that we get to take these precious breath and this clean air that we share, and that wider community have a relationship with the knowingness that our marine space is protected and preserved into the future. Except it's under threat, and it's under threat from a multitude of various angles, from the untreated discharges that occur, marine plastics, climate change, and future industries such as seabed mining can all have incredible effects on destabilizing the ecological assemblage of our marine system. And as such, at Motiti, we were watching this happen. We were watching the large complex life systems that surrounded the island slowly dwindle to barren conditions. And we were losing our relationship with our taonga species. And that loss of relationship was most represented within the loss of our cultural association with hapuku in the near shore island areas, because we had grown up, our trustees, a kaumatu and queer of the rohe, and had grown up with the association of stories of taking coda tails and attaching them to eclonia and catching with hooks and catching hapuku inside the shallow reef systems in order to feed the whole community. Now that tradition can't continue right now, and that's really reflected in this trend of a degrading marine space. And a lot of that's due to the inappropriate activities and the industrialization of fishing pressure that has pretty much scoured the benthic environment over the last, well, arguably the last 50 years has been the most impactful. And it was in 1958 that the then kaumatu and Pākehā of Motiti set out in trying to seek reservations for the Rohemoana, because we were watching this degradation happening nearly 70 years ago, and we were that concerned about the loss of our subsistent relationship with our marine space. So in 2009, the trust was established, and basically given the daunting task of trying to work a pathway through this quagmire, which is the legislative system of the New Zealand government, to which obviously there are a lot of acts that govern the marine space. Some of the largest marine protection areas are actually created by the protections around oil infrastructure and cable zones, and that lends to just understanding that it's about the purpose that really comes down to why we have or what warrants having these protections in place. So obviously, when you're thinking about fishing as a problem, you go to the Fisheries Act naturally. And so we chose to see how far the Fisheries Act would be able to facilitate our special relationship with the marine space. And we found quite clearly that the Fisheries Act's purpose was fundamentally to protect the act of fishing and not to protect the life force of the marine space, because it manages its space in such a scale that facilitates the economic development or the economic opportunity of that resource, as opposed to our intrinsic relationship with place and space. And so when we exhausted the opportunity or the potential of the Fisheries Act by applying for a taipuri and then a mātaitai. And then we also went about seeking a Section 186 rāhui in order to preserve the benefits and the gains of the exclusion zone in the post-RENA recovery. And we were told that there was no place for our sacred spaces to be protected within the Fisheries Act. That led to us then moving towards establishing a declaration in the Environment Court in order to facilitate the controls around the Mōtiti Natural Environment Area, or the Mōtiti Rohemoana. So the Mōtiti Rohemoana was first generated as a discrete space by the coastal policy statement in order to be able to provide for the special natural characters and the special relationships that are associated with this marine area. It's beyond just the act of fishing or just the act of one activity, but it actually looks at the integrated relationship that space and place has and the associations that it provides for the well-being of our wider community. So in the regional policy statement, we obviously took that to appeal. So there's a long line of litigation in terms of the evolution or the whakapapa that sits behind this kaupapa or this issue. And firstly, it was important to be able to, I suppose, come to some sort of agreement on that these places were special. And so we developed schedules using our native management plans, which are hapu based and marae based, and enabling the natural character values to be represented within that coastal marine area. And this is in essence what created the Mōtiti natural environment. On top of that, we have our cultural landscape, which we then further informed through the coastal environment planning process, where we appealed the coastal environment plan on the basis that it didn't provide for the New Zealand coastal policy statement and failed to protect our wāhi tapu, our wāhi taonga, our associations, relationships, our indigenous biodiversity, the habitats and the landscape features that are associated with a nationally and regionally significant area. So within the Mōtiti Rohemoana, we have a number of wāhi tapu or toka tapu, and those toka tapu are sacred places because of the sacrifices that our ancestors, our tupuna, had made many generations ago. And that kōrero tuku iho, or that story handed down from generation to generation, enables us the appreciation of the values that are associated with that life force, or the mauri that is held within these places and spaces. The court in the appeal agreed that within areas where there were cumulative values, or the concatenation of values, that they warranted the protections of such nature that prohibited the destruction of flora and fauna. And that is in order to preserve the life force and the biodiversity and habitat values, which are obviously intrinsically connected to those reef systems. What we sought to argue was that the biological, by using ecologists and biologists, that the biological buffer zone between our toka tapu, in order to preserve that life force, would require at least a nautical mile of buffer around it, as the studies in at various other marine protection areas and marine reserves around Aotearoa have shown is that the fringe effects of activities and of destructive nature activities do have effects within those protection areas. So although there's arguably a perimeter around our marine protection areas, the actual effects of the activities outside of them actually have much deeper influences within those marine reserves. These, and just to clarify, these are not marine reserves. These are actually mōtiti protection areas for the values associated with them, which have been protected by the Resource Management Act. So within the context of what we have been working through as an iterative process of developing marine spatial planning and marine information or informed management opportunities for developing better and more informed management regimes, and that's because of the nature of the interface. So where we see the opportunities going forward is that the activities that are destroying our marine space need to actually show a means of being able to mitigate the effects that they're having against the biodiversity and habitat, against cultural values, and enable where its impacts are less affected, enable those opportunities to be more, I suppose, to be more efficient and effective at undertaking them without destroying our marine space. So we finally had received the final decision that confirmed what is now, I suppose, some rudimentary lines, because for some reason we like to have straight lines in our world where nature doesn't see straight lines. And you know, it's really, it was quite interesting, because when we went through the process of design, everyone doesn't mind not having a straight line until they actually have to come down to the reality that that humans have to interact with this space. And so the regional council has confirmed that they would much prefer to have straight lines in order to communicate these values. From, I suppose, an environmental perspective and a cultural perspective, it's about the gradients of association and the interconnectedness of that association. That's much more important than trying to govern necessarily the people, because we believe that people underlyingly want to do good and they want to see good. And as soon as we start to inform how to appropriately interact with our environments, we will start to see the opportunity for those communities to have a relationship without you know, causing harm to them or themselves, to the environment, and in a way that and to the cultural associations that exist within that environment, and to themselves that as being part of that environment also. Because what we do know is that that when we protect something, we see a restorative relationship occur with our marine space, and it happens relatively rapidly. What we saw with the exclusion zone at Aotearoa is we saw that within a matter of 3-4 years, we started to see tremendous recovery happening around the reef, albeit that there is a ship stricken on the Tokatapu. And in essence, you know, it kind of defines that you can have one of the largest maritime disasters in Aotearoa's history and still see the ocean recover. And I think that really lends to the idea that we need to be thinking about restoring our marine space in order to restore the life force and buffer the effects of climate change and the over extraction that's already been happening. So just to recap in terms of where the fundamentals kind of, I suppose, where the divisions lie. If we're talking about fish inside a cage, or the act of fishing like that's in the screen here, we're really discussing that the Fisheries Act. This is clearly governed by the Fisheries Act. But if we're talking about the relationship between our toka here, our tokatapu here, and the kainga, or the home of our koura, our crayfish, This is a relationship that can be protected by the Resource Management Act when we are protecting our places and spaces that are significant to us. So because of the values of landscape, because of the values of biodiversity, of habitat, of cultural association, of national and regional significance, this is why we have the opportunity to actually protect and preserve those into the future, so that future generations can enjoy these spaces as a living ocean. Because fundamentally, if one thing tugs on a single thing of nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. Kia ora no tātou. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, Fleur.
Thank you, Te Atarangi. Super. It's such a good concept to use the RMA and the Fisheries Act to protect Maori Island. Do you think you could use this technique in other parts in Aotearoa?
I think that these associations and our relationship with the moana and the ocean is a treasured relationship, and I think at a fundamental level, our community appreciates that treasured relationship, and by having that treasured relationship, our community should be able to inform what's appropriate and inappropriate in our coastal marine area. That's been one of the biggest challenges for regional authorities, is actually to do their duty and their job to inform those values so that we can all live in an abundant environment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. What are your future plans for the Motiti Rohemoana Trust? Yeah.
So at the moment, we're about to enter into a further process for the Motiti Rohemoana and the wider Bay of Plenty around, I suppose, making the coastal environment area compliant with the NZCPS, or the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. We believe that although we have achieved the protections of our tokatapu and our wahitapu areas within our Rohemoana, many other people and tangata whenua haven't had the opportunity to express their associations and relationships with their areas as well. And this is really an opportunity for Maori to be able to engage in informing those special values that are in their rohe, and to finally actually restore the mauri that has been lost by the inappropriate activities that have persisted only for the last 50 odd years. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we go back 50 years before technology, or maybe 100 years before technology, these places were intergenerationally handed from one tribe to another tribe, and from one understanding to another understanding through the generations as a knowledge basis for management. And that whakapapa actually enables a coexistence with a healthy marine environment.
Yeah, yeah. It's a beautiful project. I find it very, very inspiring. I think I'm not the only one. I'm just going to check if we have any questions up on Facebook from somebody. Sharon Goldstein says it's great to be listening. Romaine Ferry says kia ora te atarangi, kia ka motiti. Charlotte Hardy says kia ora from Maumanganui. And she thinks it's super cool that preserving the Maori connected to the reef system with that buffer zone. I agree. Yeah, that was it. I just want to thank you so much for talking to us today. It's super cool to see all the Motitians fighting for the islands and our oceans. And I do hope that the future will bring more of this sort of preservation about. Yeah, I'm just really looking forward to see more of that work in the future.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we start to appreciate that there are other values that we share intrinsically. There are values that community can help to inform, whether they be tangata whenua, whether they be tauiwi, whether they be Pākehā, that they actually have associations and values that really need to be part of the decision-making process, and and that we need to start to make as many conscious efforts as we can to preserve the marine space, because I don't know how much that Jenga blocks in this presentation actually really resonates with people, but we are reaching some very disturbing feedback loops that are starting to happen. Obviously, the Kinnabarron relationship in relation to predator species is something that humans have done. Nothing else has done that. Nothing else has removed those predator species from our reef systems. It's actually it's human activity that's done that. But on a wider context, it's really looking at, well, how are we going to build resilience into our marine space into the future? And that's not just going to happen by thinking that we can keep doing what we're doing. If we don't start change today, we actually sign the warrants of future generations to experiencing a degraded environment, and that degradation will degrade not only the environment, but it will degrade our social relationships with natural spaces.
Agreed. I saw one question from Ben Knight coming in. He says that he's heard from people within the commercial fishing sector that these new RMA controls can only be deployed against fishing activities in general rather than specific fishing methods. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, so I suppose it's because the Environment Court found, like, this interpretation is because the Environment Court found that these were the prohibition of the destruction of flora and fauna in those three areas as being initial controls. The RMA doesn't actually necessarily, it's very hard for the Resource Management Act to come to the conclusion of prohibiting activities. When we actually engaged in this whole process, the prohibition was, so far out of my, every advice we had was that it's not going to be able to be achieved, that we'll find restricted discretionary activities as a means of being able to find compliance. What we've found is that actually, where all of these values exist, there is the opportunity to exercise a prohibition order on obviously the destruction of flora and fauna. But in areas that I've really, like our taonga moana relationship, the balance of the Motuti natural environment area, we would just like to see that the activities of pots, nets and dredges be restricted in that space, because fundamentally the act of broad spectrum extraction is what's destroying the character of our marine space in the nearshore area. There's no ifs, buts or maybes. If we drop a pot, we remove a vast majority of the predator or the urchin grazing predators out of the system. And the issue that we have now is, because of the grading process, all of the coda or the crayfish that are in our reef systems are all at just below market value, market grade, and therefore are not competent in being able to predate on the kinna or the urchin. And therefore, that's why we're having Kinnabarrons proliferate around the east coast of New Zealand, but it's actually around the whole of New Zealand, apart from, as I was reminded, apart from our World Heritage areas in the Milford Sounds, where they seem to be able to still have a thriving business. The reality is if we don't get a handle on the way in which we're engaging with our coastal marine area, we will continue to see the erosion of the characters, the qualities and the conditions of the marine life that we're having a relationship with. And we only have to look at the megafauna to see the impacts of net fishing dredging that have happened around New Zealand. Mussel dredging has collapsed the whole industry. Scallop dredging is doing exactly the same. We need to be able to move to more empathetic relationships with our marine environment, and in some cases that means that we transition some of our coastal marine areas into areas where there is only hook and line relationships, and into areas where it's only a diving relationship that can be had, and in some areas where we just enjoy to experience it like these children are experiencing Lee Marine Reserve here. If we don't start to get a handle on applying some informed decisions around the appropriateness of activities in our coastal marine area, we're not going to see a change in the marine character or the marine landscape that our children are engaging with. So just to sum it all up, we believe that there is scope for the appropriateness of controls in the coastal marine area, and we believe if we collectively would like to see controls in the coastal marine area, we should be able to ask for them through our taonga moana relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful note to end this on. I think it will leave a lot of people thinking about their actions and what impact it has on our oceans. And yeah, let's hope to see more of this coming into the future.
Yes, and we've got to do it now. So
exactly, yeah.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.